You're watching a free sample video from Teacher's Test Prep. For videos like this one covering every area of your exam, visit us today at www.teacherstestprep.com.
The water cycle. The water cycle comes up quite a bit on the test. Sometimes they'll ask specific multiple choice questions, and it can also come up as a written response where you're asked to diagram and explain the water cycle. So let me explain the major phases that you'll want to talk about if you're describing the water cycle. Let's start in the ocean. The water in the ocean gets heated up by the sun and it eventually evaporates. So that's the first stage that we'll start with, evaporation. So those particles rise up and in the air they start to pull together. If you ever look at water on a table, you push a droplet towards another droplet and they sort of pull together. Well, that's what water likes to naturally do. So those droplets, those little particles in the sky that are vapor, start to pull together into larger and larger droplets until you have big liquid droplets that are too heavy to remain suspended in the air. That process of pulling together we call condensation. And once they get condensed, as I said, to where they're too big to stay in the air, they fall to earth. And we call that precipitation. Sometimes those clouds being made of the little water vapors, get pushed over land before that happens. Sometimes it just rains right back into the ocean. But let's say it gets pushed over land and then that precipitation occurs. That precipitation can come down as rain, snow, sleet, hail. All of those are forms of precipitation, and really the main factor determining which form is the temperature. The colder it is, you're going to get things like snow. If it's warmer, you'll get things like rain, of course. When the water reaches the ground, one of two major things typically happens. Either the ground is too saturated or not porous enough to receive that water, or it is porous enough and not saturated and it does receive the water. If the water goes into the ground, we call that infiltration. And that's why we have a water table. People drill wells down to reach that water table, that layer underground of where the water is situated that the ground has absorbed. So that's the process of infiltration. If the ground is already saturated or it's not porous enough, as I mentioned, then the water is not absorbed and it runs off. So runoff occurs with streams and rivers, and that runoff takes the water back to the ocean or to lakes and places like that. And that's when it's most likely to act as an agent of transportation for sediments. So rivers take those sediments, things like salt, back to the ocean. Rivers, lakes, and oceans and estuaries may differ greatly in their salinity levels. Rivers, lakes, oceans, you know what these are. But an estuary, in case you're not familiar with that term, is a place where a freshwater river or stream goes into a saltwater body like the ocean. So you get water there that is partly fresh, partly salt, what we call a brackish environment. So that's an estuary. The differences in the salinity of these different bodies depends on how the water enters and leaves the body. Sometimes they'll ask questions that relate to this on the exam. For example, Big Bear Lake has a much lower salinity level than the Salton Sea. And the reason is because there's drainage from Big Bear Lake. So when water leaves Big Bear Lake through the stream that is its drainage, it takes the salts with it. So you don't get a buildup of salts there. But the Salton Sea has no source of drainage. The only way water leaves the Salton Sea is via evaporation. And when the water evaporates, it leaves the salts behind. So salts that are carried by streams flowing into the Salton Sea cause salt to build up, but there's no way the salt can ever leave, so the salinity level increases and increases. And this is the same reason that the ocean is salty. It's because there's really no drainage source for the ocean. The ocean is the final place to where everything drains. So the salts build up there and the water only leaves via evaporation.
We hope you found this free Teacher's Test Prep sample video helpful. For more videos like this one covering all the subject matter and strategy you need to pass your exam, visit us today at www.teacherstestprep.com.